The moon hung low over the Silverwood kingdom, its pale light spilling through the thick canopy of trees, casting long silver shadows across the forest floor. Lyra walked quietly along the cobbled path that led to the grand palace, her heart heavy with thoughts she could not voice. Tonight was the Moon Festival, a night when the kingdom celebrated the bond between the Alpha King's family and the Omega clans. Every year the festival brought joy, music, and laughter, but for Lyra it was a night she had dreaded for weeks. She had always known her bond with Kale, the Alpha heir, was special. From the day they had met under the silver birch trees at the edge of the forest, an unspoken connection had bound them together. Kale had been fierce yet gentle, commanding yet protective. Lyra had trusted him with every heartbeat, believing their bond was unbreakable. But tonight, that trust was about to shatter. As Lyra approached the palace's grand courtyard, she felt the crowd's excitement, the flicker of torchlight reflecting off masks and silks. Music floated through the air, light and delicate, as dancers spun in intricate patterns. She should have felt joy. She should have felt the pride of being seen beside her mate. But a cold dread clung to her chest. Something whispered that the night would not be as she imagined. Her steps slowed when she reached the balcony overlooking the central hall. And there, beneath the moonlight, she saw him, Kale. But he was not alone. Her stomach clenched, her chest tightened, and the world around her seemed to blur. Kale stood close to her younger sister, Ilara. Their hands brushed, not lightly, not accidentally, but in a way that spoke of secret closeness. They laughed softly, leaning toward each other, voices low, intimate. Lyra felt her knees weaken, a tremor running through her body. The air felt suddenly heavier, the laughter around her a cruel echo she could not escape. She wanted to turn away, to leave, but her feet rooted themselves to the balcony stone. She could not unsee this. She could not unhear the warmth in Kale's voice when he spoke to Ilara. For a moment she thought she would collapse under the weight of betrayal. Her bond with Kale, the bond she had believed sacred, felt fragile, like glass in her hands already cracked. And then Kale looked up, his eyes searching, and in that moment, their gazes met. But something was wrong. It was not longing. It was guilt, fear. Lyra did not speak. She could not. The words lodged in her throat, refusing to escape. Her heart thundered in her chest as if warning her that something in her life had just shifted forever. Ilara turned toward her, smiling. The smile was bright, innocent on the surface, but in Lyra's mind it burned like fire. How could she not see what she was doing? How could she betray her sister in this way? Lyra felt anger rise, sharp and bitter. But more than anger, there was sorrow, deep, aching sorrow that wrapped around her soul like chains. She had loved Kale, trusted him with her heart. And now it felt as if the world itself had turned against her. She stepped back from the balcony, retreating to the shadows. No one noticed her there. No one but the wind whispering through the trees, carrying with it the scent of pine and distant smoke. The festival continued, laughter and music blending into a cruel melody she could not enjoy. And then she heard it, a quiet, deliberate voice not far behind her. "You are seeing more than you should." Luna. Lyra froze. Her breath caught. She turned slowly, and there he stood, cloaked in shadow, the Alpha King himself, Kyle's father. His eyes were sharp but not cruel. They were observant, as if he could see every thought running through her mind. Lyra began, but words failed her. How could she explain the storm of betrayal, heartbreak, and confusion raging inside her? How could she tell a king that the one she trusted most had shattered her world? The Alpha King stepped closer, his presence commanding yet calm. "I saw what happened," he said softly, though the weight in his voice made it feel heavier than any sword. "And I understand your pain." Lyra looked at him, startled. She had expected judgment, perhaps even reprimand, but instead there was recognition, understanding. "The path before you," the king continued, "is dangerous, but you can take your pain and make it power. Or you can let it destroy you. The choice is yours." Lyra's mind whirled. She had always seen him as distant, almost untouchable, a ruler whose authority inspired awe and fear. And now in the quiet of the shadowed courtyard he seemed human, vulnerable even. "What do you mean?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "I mean," he said, stepping closer, "that Kale has failed you. Your sister has betrayed you in her own way, but you need not remain a victim of their choices. You can rise above them, You can claim strength that is yours by birth and by heart. Lyra's eyes filled with tears, but she did not wipe them away. How can I rise above this? She asked, her voice small yet desperate. The Alpha King extended his hand, not in command, but in invitation. Come with me. Learn to master what is within you. Become the Luna Queen beside me, not because of them, but because of what you are. You are stronger than you believe, Lyra. And this kingdom, it needs someone like you. Lyra hesitated. She wanted to scream, to run, to flee from the shadows and never return. Yet something deep inside, an ember she had almost forgotten, stirred at his words. Strength, power, purpose. A chance to take her heartbreak and turn it into something greater. But what of Cale? The one she had loved, the one who had promised her forever? Could she ever forgive him? Could she ever look at him without remembering the betrayal she had witnessed tonight? She did not answer. She only stared at the king's extended hand, feeling the pulse of destiny in the quiet between them. Decide, he said gently, before the moon reaches its peak. The choice is yours. Will you allow yourself to be broken, or will you rise? Lyra looked toward the balcony again, toward Cale and Alara, their laughter echoing faintly in the night. Her chest ached, torn between love, pain, and the pull of something new and unknown. She swallowed hard, feeling the first spark of resolve ignite within her. Yes, she whispered finally, almost to herself. I will rise. The Alpha King inclined his head, a shadow of a smile touching his lips. Then follow me, Luna. Your path begins now. As Lyra stepped forward, leaving the balcony and the echoes of betrayal behind her, the moon seemed to shine brighter, silver light bathing the courtyard. The festival continued around her, oblivious to the silent decision she had made. But Lyra knew that nothing in her life would ever be the same again. She had chosen power. She had chosen herself, and the path she now walked would lead her into a world of secrets, shadows, and unexpected alliances. But even in the quiet triumph of her choice, a small, stubborn ache remained in her chest, a reminder that the heart's scars did not fade so easily. And somewhere in the midst of the celebration and music, Cale's gaze met hers once more, filled with regret and longing. Lyra did not look away. She did not flee. She had made her choice, and the kingdom would soon learn that the Luna Queen was rising, not from love, but from fire, heartbreak, and unyielding strength. And in the shadows, the Alpha King watched her, a silent promise in his eyes. This was only the beginning. The palace halls were vast and silent, their high ceilings lost in shadows. Lyra's footsteps echoed softly on the polished marble floor as she followed the Alpha King, whose presence seemed to bend the air around him with quiet authority. Torchlight flickered along the walls, casting golden streaks that danced over ancient tapestries depicting battles, alliances, and rulers long gone. Every step Lyra took felt heavier than the last, as if the weight of destiny pressed against her shoulders. The Alpha King led her to a secluded chamber at the heart of the palace, a room few had seen. Moonlight streamed through a tall, arched window, painting silver patterns across the floor. In the center, a small pool of still water reflected the night sky. The air smelled faintly of jasmine and old wood, a mixture both comforting and strange. Sit, the Alpha King said, his voice calm, yet carrying a subtle command. Lyra obeyed, lowering herself onto a stone bench at the edge of the pool. She stared into the water, seeing her own reflection framed by the silver light, but the image seemed unfamiliar. The girl who looked back at her had sadness in her eyes, yet also a spark she had almost forgotten existed. You have chosen to rise, the Alpha King said, standing beside her. His shadow fell across the water, merging with hers. Few could make such a decision after betrayal. Most would break or hide in sorrow. Lyra kept her gaze on the pool. I don't know if I'm strong enough, she admitted. Her voice was soft, almost drowned by the quiet of the chamber. Everything I believed in, everything I trusted, it's gone. The Alpha King crouched beside her, studying her with an intensity that made her heart skip. Strength is not the absence of pain, he said. It is moving forward despite it. You have been wounded and yet you stand. That is strength. That is what will make you the Luna Queen. Lyra swallowed, her throat tight. But Cale, my mate, I loved him. Her voice trembled, breaking slightly. And now, I don't know if I can ever forgive him. Or my sister. The Alpha King placed a hand lightly on her shoulder, not pressing, only guiding. Forgiveness is a choice you will make in time. Right now your task is not to forgive, but to claim your power. To stand as Luna. The rest will follow. Lyra looked up at him, searching his eyes for a hint of impatience, of cruelty. But there was none. Only steady, unwavering focus. She had seen him command armies, settle disputes, and rule a kingdom with unmatched authority. Yet here he was speaking to her not as a king, but as someone who understood the weight of loss. "How do I start?" she asked, the first flicker of determination shining through her grief. The Alpha King smiled faintly. "By knowing yourself. By understanding the strength that runs in your blood. You are no ordinary Omega, Lyra. The moon itself watches over you, granting power to those who embrace it. But that power must be honed, guided. Otherwise, it can consume you." He gestured to the pool. "Look into the water. See not what was taken from you, but what you can become." Lyra leaned over, her reflection wavering in the ripples. At first, she only saw sorrow, loss and heartbreak mirrored back at her. But as she focused, she began to see something else. A faint glow emanated from beneath her skin in the reflection, soft and silvery like moonlight pressed into flesh. Her heart quickened. What is that?" she whispered. "That is the power within you," the Alpha King said. "It has always been there, waiting for you to claim it. Your grief, your anger, your desire to rise, they are not weaknesses. They are fuel." Lyra took a deep breath, letting the cool air fill her lungs. She could feel a tingling warmth spreading through her fingers, her arms, her chest. It was subtle at first, then stronger, like a quiet heartbeat rising into rhythm with the world around her. For the first time in days, she felt alive. "Good," the Alpha King said, stepping back to give her space. "Now focus. Channel what you feel into the water. Let it guide you." Lyra hesitated, but then she placed both hands on the edge of the pool. Closing her eyes, she thought of the betrayal, of Kale's broken promises, of her sister's laughter that had once been sweet, but now cut like a knife. She felt the fire in her chest swell, mixing with the sadness, creating something fierce and new. Slowly, the water began to shimmer. Silver light rose from its surface, casting intricate patterns on the walls, wrapping the chamber in magic. Her eyes opened, wide with awe. I can feel it," she said, voice trembling. "The power, it's real." "It is," the Alpha King confirmed, "and it will grow stronger as you grow stronger. But remember, Lyra, power is not only for protection, it is also a responsibility. A weapon, a shield, and a guide. You must learn to control it, or it may control you." Lyra nodded. "I understand." The Alpha King's eyes softened slightly. "Good. Tomorrow we begin training. You will learn to harness your strength, to bend it to your will, not for revenge, but for your destiny, for this kingdom, and for yourself." Lyra felt a shiver of anticipation. The thought of learning, growing, and rising above her pain stirred hope within her. She had chosen to claim power, to become Luna. And now, the path was opening before her, lit by the silver glow of the moon. Just as she began to relax, a faint sound echoed through the chamber, a whisper soft and chilling. Lyra froze, listening. The sound was like a rustling, like something moving in the shadows of the palace. She turned, scanning the room, but saw nothing. "Did you hear that?" she asked, her voice tight with unease. The Alpha King's eyes narrowed slightly, his usual calm shifting to alertness. "Yes," he said softly. "The shadows here are old. They speak when the moon is high. Something stirs in the kingdom, a spirit, perhaps even a curse." Lyra's pulse quickened. "A curse?" The Alpha King nodded. "Long ago, a dark power was bound to this palace. It sleeps now, but it awakens when the balance of the court is disrupted. Your arrival, your choice to rise, it has stirred it." Lyra swallowed hard. The weight of what she had stepped into pressed against her chest. She had thought the hardest part was facing betrayal, but now she realized that she had entered a world where magic, fate, and danger intertwined. Her journey would not only test her heart, but her courage, her mind, and her very soul. "Don't be afraid," the Alpha King said, reading her thoughts. "You will not face it alone. I will guide you, but you must be willing to trust yourself and me." Lyra took a deep breath, letting the moonlight wash over her. She could feel the pulse of the palace beneath her feet, the quiet hum of ancient magic and the power awakening in her own veins. Despite the fear, despite the betrayal she had suffered, a new sense of determination filled her. I trust you," she said quietly. The Alpha King inclined his head. Then let us begin. Tomorrow the first lesson of the Luna will begin. Lyra nodded, though sleep would not come easily that night. She stayed by the window long after the king left, staring at the moonlit courtyard below. Kale and Alara were gone from her thoughts, replaced by a vision of what she could become, a Luna who was strong, wise and untouchable in her power. And yet, somewhere deep inside, a small voice whispered a warning. The kingdom was not yet safe. Shadows moved in hidden corners, and the dark spirit the Alpha King had spoken of was stirring. Lyra pressed a hand to her chest, feeling the faint pulse of power and courage. She had chosen this path, and she would follow it no matter what waited ahead. The moon climbed higher, silver light bathing the palace in a quiet glow, and in that light Lyra made a silent vow she would rise. She would master her power, and when the time came she would face every shadow that dared to threaten her kingdom. But deep in the palace, unseen, a shadow shifted. Eyes gleamed in the darkness, watching the Luna with silent intent. The night was far from over, and the true test of her strength was only beginning. The first rays of dawn filtered through the tall palace windows, painting the marble halls with streaks of gold. Lyra stood in the training chamber, a vast room lined with mirrors and ancient runes that pulsed faintly with silver light. The scent of jasmine lingered from the previous night, mingling with the sharp tang of the stone beneath her bare feet. Her palms tingled as she flexed her fingers, already sensing the power that slept within her, waiting to be awakened. The Alpha King entered without a sound, as if he had stepped from shadow itself. His presence filled the room with quiet authority. "Today begins your first lesson," he said. "You must learn not only to feel your power, but to command it. Strength without control is chaos. Chaos destroys everything." Lyra nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. She had seen herself as fragile, a broken omega, betrayed by her mate and sister alike. But the fire inside her had not been extinguished. She would not let it die. She would rise, even if it meant walking a path she did not yet understand. The king gestured to the pool of water at the center of the room. "Focus. Feel the magic within you. Let it flow through your limbs, your heart, your mind. It is yours. Claim it." Lyra stepped forward, placing her hands in the cool water. The surface shimmered, reflecting not just the light of the rising sun, but the depth of her own emotions. She thought of Kale, of the warmth they had shared and the betrayal she had witnessed. She thought of Alara, her sister, whose laughter now seemed like a distant echo of innocence lost. She allowed the emotions to rise, to mix with the latent power in her veins. Slowly the water glowed brighter, and she felt it respond to her. It rippled, lifted and rose in silver arcs that danced across the room. Lyra gasped, feeling a thrill she had never known. "Good," the Alpha King said, his voice low and approving. "You are learning quickly. But remember, the magic is more than light and power. It listens to your heart, to your intentions. Luna's strength comes from clarity, not fury." Lyra's gaze hardened. Clarity. Control. She would master both. But even as she focused, a chill ran down her spine, subtle but insistent. The shadows in the room seemed to flicker unnaturally, stretching toward her like fingers reaching from the walls. She shivered, trying to dismiss it as fatigue or nerves. But deep in her chest, a voice whispered, "Something watches, waiting." "Do you feel it?" she asked the Alpha King, voice barely audible. He did not answer immediately. Instead, he circled the pool, studying her movements. Then finally he spoke. "Yes, you are not imagining it. The palace is not as empty as it seems. Something old stirs. You may be drawing its attention." Lyra's heart skipped a beat. "A spirit?" she asked. "Perhaps," he replied. "Or a curse. The palace has long held secrets, and your presence has awakened some of them. But do not fear. Fear is weakness. Only knowledge and courage will protect you." The words settled over her like a mantle. She felt a mixture of fear and exhilaration. This was no longer simply about rising from heartbreak. This was about survival, about power, about destiny. The king moved closer. "Come. Today you will learn to reach beyond yourself, to sense the threads that connect life, magic, and spirit. Only by understanding them can you control them." Lyra followed him to the far side of the chamber, where the floor was etched with intricate runes. They pulsed faintly as though alive. The Alpha King traced a hand over them, murmuring words in a language she did not understand. The symbols glowed brighter, and she felt warmth bloom in her chest. Now, he said, close your eyes. Sense the world around you. Not with sight, but with feeling. Magic is a language. Listen. Lyra obeyed, letting the world fade away. She breathed slowly, focusing on the pulse of the palace, the heartbeat of its stones, the whisper of ancient magic. At first, there was nothing but stillness. Then faintly she felt it. A tug, a presence at the edges of her mind, something shadowed, distant yet insistent. Her eyes snapped open. I feel it, she whispered. Something. Watching. The Alpha King nodded. Good, you are sensing the truth. But do not rush. Strength without understanding is dangerous. Learn to let it come to you rather than chasing it. Lyra took a deep breath, letting her fear settle into determination. She would not be ruled by shadows or doubt. She would rise above them. Days passed in the training chamber. Lyra learned to channel her emotions into power, to turn grief and anger into energy that could shape the world around her. She lifted objects with her mind, felt the pulse of the palace walls, and learned to see the faint trails of magic left behind by those who had walked the halls before her. But the shadows never fully left. Sometimes in the quiet moments she would see movement just beyond her vision. Sometimes she would hear whispers in languages she could not understand. And always she felt it. The presence of something watching, waiting for the right moment. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the sky burned with gold and crimson, Lyra wandered the palace gardens, seeking solace in the scent of flowers and the gentle rustle of leaves. Her reflection shimmered in the pond, silver and calm, yet she knew the calm was fragile. She heard footsteps behind her and turned. Cale stepped into the garden, his expression pale, haunted. For a moment she thought her heart would betray her, but she steadied herself. Lyra, Cale began, but she held up a hand. Do not speak, she said softly yet firmly. Your words cannot change what has already been done. He lowered his gaze, shame and regret written clearly on his face. I was foolish. I let my weakness guide me. I betrayed you, and I can never take that back. Lyra looked away, her gaze on the silvered pond. No, she said quietly. You cannot take it back. But I will not be ruled by anger or pain. I have chosen a new path, one where I rise above betrayal, not drown in it. Cale nodded, silent. He had no answers that could heal her, no comfort that could mend the wound, and perhaps, she thought, that was the point. That night, Lyra returned to her chamber, and the shadows seemed to move closer, as if sensing her newfound resolve. She drew the curtains and sat by the window, watching the moon climb higher, silver and luminous. It was beautiful, and yet she felt the weight of the darkness she had glimpsed lingering just beyond the edges of her vision. The Alpha King appeared behind her silently. You are learning quickly, he said. But knowledge alone is not enough. You must be ready to face what comes. The shadow you sense, it is not idle. It tests those who are unprepared, waiting for a mistake. We must be ready. Lyra turned to him, determination burning in her eyes. Then teach me, she said. I will not let it harm the kingdom. I will not be afraid. He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Good. Tomorrow we take the next step. You will confront the shadow, not with fear, not with anger, but with clarity and courage. You are ready to see what lies hidden. The night stretched on, quiet except for the soft rustle of leaves and the distant hum of the palace. Lyra closed her eyes, focusing on the silver glow within her. She could feel the power pulsing, growing, intertwining with her heart. And then faintly a whisper reached her ears. Not in words, but in feeling, cold, ancient, patient. I am watching. I am waiting. Lyra opened her eyes, her chest tightening. The shadows in the corner of the room moved slightly, as if aware she had noticed them. She did not panic. She did not flee. She was no longer the broken Omega who had once trembled at betrayal. She was rising. She was Luna. And she would face whatever waited in the shadows, no matter how ancient or powerful it was. The moon climbed higher, silver light flooding the chamber. Lyra stood in the center of the room, her arms lifted, her heart steady, and the faint shimmer of her magic glowing across her skin. The shadows paused, silent, as if acknowledging her strength. And then slowly they began to shift, moving deeper into the palace. Lyra clenched her fists, ready. The test was coming, and she would not fail. The wind whipped through the high towers of the Silverwood Palace, carrying the scent of pine and distant rain. Lyra stood on the balcony, her hair dancing around her face in silver waves under the moonlight. The kingdom stretched before her, a patchwork of forests, rivers, and stone walls that gleamed faintly under the night sky. For the first time since the betrayal, she felt a spark of quiet pride. She had chosen her path, and she was walking it without faltering. Behind her, the Alpha King approached silently. He did not speak at first, allowing the sound of the wind and the distant howl of wolves to fill the night. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft yet carried weight that made the air feel alive. "You have grown stronger," he said, standing beside her. "The first tests were not only for your magic but for your heart. You have endured pain and still chosen clarity. That is rare even among rulers." Lyra turned to him, her eyes meeting his. "I had no choice," she said. "If I had let anger rule me, I would be nothing. I'm learning who I am, not who Kale or Ilara wanted me to be." The Alpha King studied her with a faint intensity, as if measuring the depth of her resolve. "And yet the past is not gone," he said. "You must face it, or it will shadow your strength. Kale will return. He will seek forgiveness. You must be ready, Lyra, not with weakness, but with understanding." Lyra exhaled slowly. "I do not know if I can forgive him," she admitted, voice quiet. "But I will not let him or my sister control my destiny. I will rise no matter what." The king nodded, a shadow of a smile touching his lips. "Then you are ready for the next step. Tonight you confront not only the shadow that lurks in the palace, but also the truths that have been hidden. Only by facing both will you grow into the Luna you are meant to be." The chamber they entered was ancient, carved into the bedrock beneath the palace. Candles flickered along the walls, illuminating runes that pulsed faintly, as if breathing. The air smelled of earth and old stone, of secrets waiting to be revealed. "You must enter the center," the king said, gesturing to a circle etched in silver, "and allow the shadow to find you. Do not resist it. Do not fear it. Let it test you, and you will discover the strength that has always been yours." Lyra stepped into the circle, her heart hammering in her chest. The silver runes glowed brighter under her feet, and the shadows in the corners of the room seemed to stretch toward her. For a moment, doubt surged. Could she truly face this darkness? Could she face the past, the betrayal, and still remain herself? Then she felt it, a whisper of energy, cold and patient, brushing against her mind. She did not panic. Instead, she drew in a deep breath and allowed herself to feel every emotion at once: sorrow, anger, hope, courage. The shadow swirled around her, sensing the mixture, probing, testing. "You are strong," a voice whispered, echoing through the chamber. Not Kale, not her sister, not the king, but something older, darker, unseen. "But do you understand strength? Or will you crumble under its weight?" Lyra's fist clenched. "I will not crumble," she said firmly, her voice echoing in the vast chamber. "I am Lyra, Luna of Silverwood. I will not be afraid." The shadow recoiled slightly, then shifted, circling her like a living thing. It pressed against her mind, forcing memories, emotions, and visions into clarity. Lyra saw herself as a child, laughing under the silver birch trees. She saw Kale, the bond they shared, and then the betrayal, the heartbreak that had felt like fire in her chest. And she saw the Alpha King, calm and patient, guiding her without controlling her, showing her that strength came not from domination, but from trust, from clarity. Lyra took another deep breath, centering herself. The silver glow within her pulsed brighter, spilling outward and pushing the shadow back. The air hummed with energy, the chamber vibrating with power and potential. Slowly, the darkness withdrew, leaving a faint trace but no longer overwhelming her. "You have done well," the Alpha King said quietly, his voice a calm anchor in the charged room. "But this is only the beginning. Shadows will always test those who rise. The question is, will you rise every time?" Lyra exhaled, letting the tension drain from her body. "I will," she said simply, though her voice carried a steel that had not existed before. "Every time." Just then the doors to the chamber opened. Kyle stepped inside, hesitation and fear etched into his features. For the first time since the betrayal, Lyra looked directly at him without the weight of heartbreak clouding her. She was not angry. She was not broken. She was calm, resolute. Lyra," Kyle began, his voice low. "I have come to beg your forgiveness. I was wrong. I let my feelings, my confusion, my weakness. I betrayed you." She raised a hand, stopping him. "Kyle," she said, voice steady, "I do not need your excuses. What matters now is not the past. It is what I choose to do next. And my choice is to rise above what was broken, not to let it rule me." Kale's eyes widened, a mixture of awe and sorrow. I understand, he whispered. Lyra turned back to the Alpha King. I am ready to move forward, she said. I will not be afraid. I will not falter. The king nodded, placing a hand lightly on her shoulder. Then we prepare. The kingdom faces threats beyond betrayal, forces that would see Silverwood fall. You are not only a Luna in title. You are a guardian, a leader, and a force of strength, and together we will face whatever comes. For hours they trained. Lyra learned to sense the flow of energy in the palace, to see faint traces of magic left behind, and to anticipate movement in shadows. She learned to focus her emotions, turning them into precise, controlled power rather than chaos. Each moment tested her patience, her courage, and her heart. But each time she rose, stronger than before, the Alpha King stood beside her, guiding without controlling, teaching without demanding. By midnight, the chamber was quiet again. Lyra leaned against the cool stone, exhaustion and exhilaration mingling. The Alpha King studied her, eyes faintly glowing in the candlelight. You have grown tonight, he said, not just in power but in understanding. The shadow will return, yes, but you will be ready. And when it does, it will learn that the Luna Queen of Silverwood is not to be underestimated. Lyra allowed herself a small smile. Thank you, she said quietly. Not for teaching her magic alone, but for showing her the strength within herself, the courage she had forgotten in Heartbreak. He inclined his head slightly, a faint, almost imperceptible smile tugging at his lips. The path is yours to walk, he said, and you will not walk it alone. Outside, the moon bathed the palace in silver light, casting long shadows across the walls. Somewhere in the distance, wolves howled, a chorus that seemed to echo the promise of strength, loyalty, and vigilance. Lyra pressed a hand to her chest, feeling the steady pulse of her power. For the first time since the betrayal, she felt whole. Not because the past was erased, but because she had claimed herself. She was rising not just as Luna, but as someone who would shape her own destiny. Unshaken by the failures of others, and yet, deep in the shadows of the palace, faint eyes glimmered, watching, waiting, testing. The night was not done, and the challenges yet to come would demand every ounce of courage and clarity she could summon. Lyra did not flinch. She had faced shadows, betrayal, and doubt. She had risen, and she would rise again, no matter what came next. The fire within her burned steadily, silver light flowing through her veins, illuminating the path ahead. The Luna Queen was awakening. The palace was silent except for the faint echo of Lyra's footsteps on the stone floor. The air was thick with anticipation, a strange mix of tension, magic, and the scent of wet pine carried in from the gardens outside. Tonight, she would face the shadows that had haunted the palace, the betrayals that had wounded her heart, and the choices that would define her destiny. The Alpha King stood at the center of the grand hall, his presence commanding even in the dim candlelight. His eyes, sharp yet steady, met hers, and for a moment, Lyra felt the weight of trust and understanding that had grown between them over the past weeks. She was no longer a broken Omega. She was rising, strong and determined, ready to claim the power she had earned. You are ready, he said quietly, his voice carrying both reassurance and authority. Whatever comes tonight, you will face it as the Luna, not as someone betrayed, not as someone broken, but as a queen who commands her own destiny. Lyra nodded, letting the silver glow within her pulse brighter. The magic that had been stirred in the palace now flowed freely through her, a river of light and power that echoed with the strength of her resolve. She took a deep breath, steadying herself, and then the doors to the hall opened. Alara stepped in first, her face pale but determined. Her eyes flicked to Lyra, and for the first time Lyra saw fear there. Fear and regret mixed with stubborn defiance. Behind her, faint shadows seemed to twist and stretch, as if drawn to Alara's presence. The dark spirit bound to the palace had found a pawn in her sister. Lyra, Alara whispered, her voice trembling. I didn't know. I didn't mean to. You betrayed me, Lyra said, her voice calm but firm. And yet I am not here to destroy you. Tonight you have a choice. Step back from the shadows or be consumed by them. Alara hesitated, the pull of the dark spirit visible in her eyes. The shadows writhed, pressing closer, testing, tempting. But Lyra did not falter. She stepped forward, silver light radiating from her hands, illuminating the hall. You have always been my sister, Lyra said softly, and I will not let darkness claim you. But you must choose. The shadows cannot be reasoned with. Only courage can face them. For a long moment, silence filled the hall. Then with a shiver, Ilara stepped back, shaking her head. The shadows recoiled and the dark spirit hissed, retreating slightly into the corners of the room. You see, Lyra said, her voice steady, even the shadows fear the light within us when we claim it. The Alpha King moved to her side, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Your strength is not just magic, Lyra, he said. It is heart, courage, and clarity. That is what makes a Luna. That is what makes a queen. Lyra turned to face the hall, her gaze sweeping over the remaining darkness. The shadowed spirit had not fully retreated. It lingered in the far corners, testing her, challenging her. She felt its cold presence brush against her mind, but she did not flinch. Instead, she drew the energy of the palace, the moonlight, and her own heart into herself, letting it flow outward like silver fire. Show yourself, she commanded. Her voice echoed in the hall, firm, unwavering. I am Luna. I will not be afraid. I will not falter. The light within me is stronger than your darkness. The shadows twisted, rising like smoke, but Lyra's glow pushed them back, bending them to the edges of the hall. Her heart pounded not with fear, but with power, courage, and clarity. The spirit hissed once more, then as if recognizing defeat, retreated into the walls, leaving only silence and the faint shimmer of residual magic. Lyra exhaled slowly, feeling the tension drain from her body. She had faced the darkness not with anger or despair, but with control and purpose. She had risen above the shadows, and in doing so had claimed her place as the Luna Queen of Silverwood. The Alpha King looked at her, pride and admiration shining in his eyes. You have done it, he said softly. Not just survived, but triumphed. The kingdom and its magic recognize you now. You are no longer the girl who was betrayed. You are the Luna who will lead, protect, and inspire. Lyra allowed herself a small smile. I could not have done it alone, she admitted, her eyes meeting his. Your guidance, your trust, it helped me see who I truly am. He inclined his head slightly, his gaze steady and warm. You trusted yourself, he said. I only reminded you of the strength you already had. As the first rays of dawn began to filter through the grand windows, Lyra felt a sense of peace she had not known in months. Cale, who had watched quietly from the edge of the hall, stepped forward. His expression was humble, filled with remorse and awe. Lyra, he said softly, I failed you. I cannot undo the past, but I see now your strength, your courage, and the power you have claimed. You are extraordinary. Lyra looked at him, her heart steady, her resolve firm. Kyle, the past is behind us. What matters now is not what we lost, but what we build from here. Learn from your mistakes and you may find your own strength. But my path is mine to walk, Cale nodded. Silent, and for the first time he seemed at peace, accepting that she had risen above betrayal, that she had become more than the pain she had endured. The Alpha King stepped forward, taking Lyra's hand gently. You have faced the shadows, he said. You have claimed your power. And now as Luna you stand beside me, not as a pawn, not as a victim, but as a partner, equal in purpose and destiny. Lyra felt a warmth spread through her chest, not just from the glow of her power, but from the bond that had grown between them. It was steady, strong, and unshakable, a connection built on trust, respect, and shared purpose. I am ready, she said softly, yet firmly. Ready to lead, to protect, and to face whatever comes next. The Alpha King smiled, a rare, genuine smile that lit his features in the golden morning light. Then let the kingdom witness its Luna, he said. Rise, Lyra. Your time has come. Outside the palace, the first light of dawn touched the forests and rivers, silvered by the moon fading in the sky. Wolves howled from distant hills, their calls carrying strength, loyalty, and the promise of a new era. The kingdom, still unaware of the trials that had taken place within the walls, would soon see the Luna Queen rise as its protector and guide. Lyra and the Alpha King stood side by side in the grand hall, hands clasped, hearts aligned, and eyes fixed on the horizon. The palace, the kingdom, and the magic within it all seemed to recognize the moment. The rise of a Luna who had claimed her destiny, who had faced betrayal, shadows, and doubt, and emerged stronger than ever. Even Cale, standing quietly to the side, felt the shift. Respect, humility, and admiration filled him, and he knew that Lyra would always be the force that defined this era of Silverwood. He had seen the truth of her strength, and it humbled him. Lyra turned her gaze outward once more, feeling the pulse of the palace beneath her feet, the breath of the forests around the kingdom, and the quiet, steady heartbeat of her own courage. She had faced the shadows, conquered them, and claimed her place. The Luna Queen had awakened fully, not from vengeance but from fire, clarity, and the power of her own heart. The Alpha King squeezed her hand gently. "Tonight we celebrate," he said, "and tomorrow the kingdom will see what we already know. You are Luna, and your reign has begun." Lyra nodded, smiling, feeling a calm strength settle over her. She had risen. She had conquered not only betrayal and shadow but the doubts that had haunted her since the festival. The path ahead would still have challenges, but she knew now she could face them. And under the silver light of the moon fading into dawn, Lyra finally allowed herself to believe in the future, the one she had chosen, the one she had claimed. The Luna Queen of Silverwood had arrived, ready to lead, to protect, and to shine. The shadows may have waited, but they had learned this Luna would never falter again. The moon ascended, high and luminous, casting a silver glow over the kingdom, and in that light Lyra and the Alpha King stood together, their bond now unbreakable, their strength undeniable, and their destiny clear. The Silverwood Kingdom had a Luna, and her rise would be remembered in legend, in stories whispered under the moon, and in hearts that sought courage in the face of darkness. The journey was complete. The Luna had ascended.